Well, greetings to you. Today I'd just like to have a little look at what the Chancellor is doing. The new Chancellor are making many of the mistakes I suggested she might make when I last discussed this before the election. And I need to point a few things out to you because nobody, it seems, in corporate media or government seem to have any understanding of how money works and economy works and concept of balancing your books, which is the kind of thing that we have to do all the time. Ordinary citizens, small businesses, we have to balance our books, don't we? Let's just have a look at some of the mistakes that are being made. Now, there are 6 million people in the public sector working. That's 6 million. Bear in mind, that it means there are 6 million people who are not in the wealth creating sector. That is 6 million people who are actually taking money out of the economy, because public spending doesn't put money into the economy, it takes it out. I'm not suggesting that some of those people in the public sector aren't worthwhile people and good people and hardworking people. That isn't my point. The point is we shouldn't need 6 million people in the public sector. That's far, far too many. Now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has been saying there's a big black hole of 19 billion or something like that in the accounts, and they've inherited a mess from the Conservative Party, which is completely true. They have, because the previous government was no better. So let's just have a look at some things there. The first thing that they've done now since office is they've given those 6 million people a 5% pay increase. That is unbelievably, enormously expensive. Of course it is, and that's above their own rate of inflation, which is supposed to be 2.5%, if we're prepared to believe that, which we're not. Now, further down the line, all these people, of course, are going to be on index-linked pensions, which, as I've mentioned this before, is a fortune. And if the government wrote it in their books properly, as they're supposed to do if they were if they were a PLC, if they've got to put those liabilities in their accounts, and if they didn't do that as a PLC, the directors would go to prison, but they never mention it. So this is an enormous expense for our children and our children's children, which we can't possibly afford. The government's also committed to a further 11 billion to stop the sun shining too hot in Africa. More climate nonsense. That's 11 billion. They're committed to 6 billion to the Ukraine to continue the futile and unnecessary war there. There's £1 billion a month, just under £1 billion a month, going in virtually unaudited foreign aid. So they can't claim that they need to fill a hole in the government's deficit by taking away the fuel allowance for old age pensioners. It's scandalous, isn't it, really? And why do they need this fuel allowance? Why did they need it? And that's the commitment to net zero. The reason our electricity is the third highest in Europe and has been accelerating globally faster than any other country on the face of the planet is because net zero. So the reason old age pensioners need the fuel allowance is because we have unnecessarily, stupidly, futilely the most expensive fuel and energy in the country. So it doesn't need to be thus. These are just a few things. Where if there is a hole in our budget, how simply we could deal with it just by cutting out all these silly nonsense that we send money abroad. So if there's a 19 billion hole in our budget, we could stop that if we suddenly put a moratorium on overseas spending of any sort. Send no English taxpayers' money abroad. Full stop. End of. Because we have to print it or we have to borrow it in order to be able to do that. We don't raise out of taxation what we need to have the social services and the infrastructures that we want or think we want. So that's something else we need to seriously think about. We can't go on like this without totally and utterly degrading the currency. And I've mentioned this before. The currency will be degraded because they have to borrow and print. And the economy is stifled when you tax people, ordinary people, more. I'll be saying more about these things in the next few weeks. But we've got to understand how accounts work. And the financial journalists in corporate media don't seem to understand or want to understand how this happens. And only you can suffer if you are working in the wealth creating sector or you're an old age pensioner. You're going to continue to be shafted. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.